The Chiwame Dakpa Gom to Gagi Yaga de Gomne Kandres Neighbor Ngoma Chiwe Nga Shigi in Ngoma Chi Ke Tugide Samla Dende Ke Gorwa Nga Shigi in Kandres Ke Gide
Tinebe
Na Dede. Oh, what is the best way that you found for reflecting on death? What makes it seem real and likely?
Ako ngone kande tentor sneko nunju lamrina sone shira nebar du chiku grin zabul mi kanga shigiyora nebar chigira shiel neba ke yomarwa tende tigdi yomarwa tanda ko tanda ina sanina ni karche tende ke yomarwa mangi barwa tamashirwa oti duzako chwa meda bare kadi yon tende me tiri yona sanya yona samtia ngonerwa Tene chuma suna da dere chuma so yabure da kache majuna chwese bure samya sani samta nishtangira.
So you have to we know that we're going to die, but we don't know when we're going to die. So if you cultivate a awareness of the fact that we're going to die, then it even you don't die that day, and when you say, "Oh, I didn't die that day," and then you think again the next day, "Oh, maybe I will die today." It's a constant repetition in that way.
Chiwe shosun rode yora. O ve chiwa di kadu yonya yina nga duzu tende yomare. Tili atanda rode yore sam. O tili dachi masu pe yagure sam gora. O ta tende yomare sam teni gari sam. Yang yandu sam gora.
So you have to. We know that, like we were hearing, that once we're born, then we're going to die. But then you don't know when you're going to die exactly, so then you have this awareness every day, and then at the end of the day, I didn't die today, and so then the next day you pick up and do the same thing again. So then if you have this attitude, then you're going to the mind is gradually going to become, how do you say it, you're going to be gradually become a better person, because you'll be avoiding harming others and do what you can to be helpful to others.
Lumbachil drone so tuzuchi yana tuzukazu nangeba shenshwara. Oh, tanga tuzuti madome nga dogu ye samnako droya chedu koyage chala ta kangalega ta sigra. Kon droya de samlama che lolo station chedura.
So it's just like getting ready to go somewhere. If you're going to take a trip, then you know you're going to go at a certain time, and so then you prepare yourself, and then when that time comes, you're ready to go. On the other hand, if you just sort of forget about that you have this deadline, then you just take it easy and don't prepare yourself, then you're going to be late.
Yeah, then
you won't then you won't be able to finish what you're doing, and you just have to pick up and go. How does one develop realizations of gross and subtle impermanence? Trauma, midakpa trauma dan rapa gandres. Din.
Shanda do tin nyamdo pala.
Nyamdo chi.
Shiva samlutana samba sang chigurisa.
Did shanda chi yor. Did. How does one cultivate a moment-by-moment awareness of death without developing some level of anxiety? Did some chiwi midapa gromna then some tagachigi chayongi marabe the gandres she go de mebasa go.
Tambu ko chiwa sade Misule and Jibaki Shara, Kerasani Shisare, Kerani Mangal Shisare Slavsona, Samba Migi Yora. Chua said the Cosimberia to Shiri, Sosoli Chevio Marwa. Yenako, the Chua de Yana under 10, Tambu Jigra, Samba Migi and all the Samsung Yungura, Tingonete Rako. Tinako, Chua de Yane and the Samutandi, and Tagisa Nashi, Kawa to Vieta. And Miguel Payada, Shala Chambatsawa, the Timarmandura. That is Ringa Yaguche, there was a Nami Nako, Suina Tumbuchegure, Yagude, Tavaris Tindeo, Mari Chigure, Sosos and Shagre Samgiora. A digital.
So, it's true that we're all afraid of dying. If somebody said to us, for instance, you're going to, it's certain you're going to die in 5 days, then we would get very unhappy. But in this case, if we're thinking about death constantly, then we're also making use of our life and avoiding doing any harm and cultivating love, compassion, and being helpful. So then we become better persons at the same time.
Dube tamade trawa. Ne mebe tamade, ne mebe tamala ne. Ne meba. Ne meba da langzu dan jorba dan so namnes. Simjen namle shindu che meji se. Tedana yi tendu merwa dan se. Ane ichi tendeke yo maru sungudwa. Tendu karu sungura se na. Kanga midabas tanda ngazu changmal samlu tangura. Tandanga Shemba in Sambate, Langzu de Oti, Midaware, Kebe Solitude, some Kishirene, Nemevata. Naza Meverina, Tanda Naza Met, Naza yourself, Kokichi Kitchen, whatever, and you touch your essay. Dora, Nemevata. Langzu does the cane to Samgura. Nemo Lanta. Jorbada, Penju to Chineco, Tanda Yabu Neko, Baruji Besos, Kagan, paying other 10 degrees Samgura. And so the machine, so the kill the kitchen and to be some good. To do some Lutango, some good. No, to do some Lutana, Yinako, Yi Medeada, to which you are Maris. The Korangirang Shiris. Or did show me that with the Samlutan, Kari and Gurusana, Nami, and Sudan, to enrich and Ragi. Kevala Karu the Chambatza and Yamashika to Jure. Namdo Dedus and Chambatza said they have some Kisam Kogara. Did any she's Sunani, Sundation Kario Sungora. Rangshin Rese. When she Ruruja Dedusa, Chambatza, Kondo Mache, Yabuchete, and she saw that they do Yabu and Yabame, 타고 준일에서는 개완의 지야마도 섬대신 갈팽을 콜라팽마로 소설팽마로 한도도 예배값들이 아버지 뒤던달이 미다고 시에요라 당보 딱바도 스테그 마르다세 대지른가 아버지 되세 개와도 미개와 반스도 잠바다 싸와다제 되송고도 어딘데 삼로다네 개와 야르야르시 아니 상마다 템부샤 아버지도 그 딱바르지 강라 치고 냠심 바슨도 디요라 강라 네바리 예죠 바스 나 지그레 삼사 딱바리 삼로코 댕게 텔라스기와라 테네 지바 용데시 콘 지문나치 요 마르코 딱다 레가 강가 개와체 미개와 야부치기와라 강라 치고냐면서 강라 네바 요죠 테네 지바 용데 치달라야 강라 직스 단단 아주 치달은 지구를 송기와라 다고 야부치 제스는 치달을 시고 마르코 술래 시고 마레세라 그래서 그 개와체 체 미개와 체 신나콘 제바메 텔레라고치야케 메 시와드네 랑신이 삼기와라
So then we have to understand that impermanence is the nature of things. Like if once we gather together, then we have to separate, and once we, the what would you say? Youth changes into old age. Our wealth and economic comfort will change. We have to give it up, and our good health. We might not be sick today, but certainly that will change, and we will be sick. And So what this is pointing out is that it's just the nature of things. We have this thought of that I won't die, and then we're cultivating a thought of that I could die at any moment. So then, when we do like that. It causes us, it's a kind of way of urging ourselves to make good use of the time that we have and not harm others and try to be helpful and loving and kind-hearted, such that if we've made good use of our time in that way and our mind gradually becomes virtuous, then even though we might have been afraid of death, then at the time when our death does come, we have no regret. At that point, then we can make a decision. Well, it doesn't make any sense for us to worry about our death and worry about the fact that we're dying and make others worry about our death. So then at that time we won't be having any anxiety, and we can have an attitude like, well, it doesn't matter if I die, like that. And then it's sort of death is something frightful, but we won't be frightened that time.
치와서도 소미다고 삼다기 와라. 어디 지신 나셀 소바 지소다 가레나 참아 기로 저게 자레 삼 디탈티 용거 삼디 소소에 베서 베탈이 치와 용에 다 쉬셔라. 이거네 레디어라. 어디 이거네 레 삼삼베나 디 가레서 다 친데 쉐버지 개천부 찍지 딱 받을 수 있어. 아니 친데 돈다 춘주지 돈다 틱바사 밀 디 차와체 가레네 제셔데 야부레면도 삼기라. Michi ni makashi ko tendu samlu yone dinal tada nyesu nyota mabusu maroko. O dina shingi ko samlu yardu de tundu de chamba da tsawa da mikanga tungdu chamba da tsawa de sosu nangmine ngotsu gursigdo. Namji dodi che tenge tezul ko samlu yardu yora. Ane ko chwa meda samlu do kao yongura. O nga chwa meda samlu tani yabo kewa tuku yosam da konzo hau ku yo mare sam. Chiwal kala chiw nyam semba kala ngeba yo joba tenen jigba yo dachi chidala kala jiuse jigba yo ma karjen chibra shiye teni shiyera ko ga do yo mara mezidi ya bu shibi kerra ani ta kare ta joba ke yo mara bu sho sho nyange ma chi sung do sanje chiwa de tezu ganga ko go be chunyires
so basically death is just our impermanence, and death is the nature of our lives, and not only just our lives, everything is like that. Everything has to come to an end, and so thinking about death, we're not cultivating some kind of sorrow or some kind of anxiety or difficulty, or we're not thinking like that. We're thinking, well, why, if I'm going to die, would I want to have difficult relationships with others? I want to improve my relationship with others. So then you become more loving and compassionate and thinking of improving your relationship with others, and so as you become more virtuous, then why at the time of your death would you have any reason to regret? At that time you'd be very that's just the way things are, and everything comes to an end. Not just on my own life, but everything comes to an end. So then you can leave happily at that time.
That's right. Oh yeah.
Shenda?
Tell chik labda. O ta tanda kar sore. Tendrese message na nyiri na sosu na midon dondi chesanyo do message na. Oh, dire chimaso tanda lega kewa ya usaya chungswa. Oh, dire tanda nga sobu ya buchi te de chimaso sa kawa nyamdo yongura. Mezi de ke shimbu me shena ko karde ne de se de gyude sawa ke yomara. Mezi de ke shimbu de sam chetu ya de samba sambu che da lega lap shimbu che yude kawa yongura. Mezi de de pet tanda shimbu chungswa sam tri shimbu sa ya bude. Tanda nga da ka she ma chen pe ya buchi ya samsa kawa nyamdo yongura. Jigwa di chung dura. Dire.
So then what happens is that you develop an attitude of a joyful attitude rather than fear, because when you understand that that you have another day, I have more time to cultivate beneficial attitudes towards others and to make good relationships. I have more time, even if it's a few months. You feel, oh, this is a great opportunity, and your feeling of joy you have to. What happens is that your life becomes more meaningful, and so then you feel, oh, I have a great chance to improve myself. So then there's no feeling of fear at the end of your life.
I dig better.
Did Shenda, yeah, you're right.
Oh yeah.
Did Chakya Shi Ging Nang did Nyang and the Deba Shi dan Deva o
Shishin Gewa.
Shishing Deva.
Deva.
Deva sanade.
Gewa sira.
Deva de
Gewa da lekba chikbarwa. Deva sine dir nyangele deva ne shishi gewa sira. Gewa.
Gewa. Kashe gewa.
Deva sine digira. Nyangele deva sa nyangele sute nyomol sigira. Tangji da kondu da ngaje da trado da desha tesu sigira. Desu kanga de ba zo sona, pang cha sona. Ani shiwarwa. Rasem tantu shiware. Shishi dewa ngone tere, yura mebe dewa dera. Koye dewa lepshinde tanda dewa ina kon yuri shi tunge rendu yora. Ta kon yura mebe dewa sonza. Nyangele deva shishi dewa sine shishi gewa. Tatu gewa. Legba. Legba yakbo di dur dra gewa mara. This way. Koye dewa ina koye yakbo ina dur dra shara. Dewe chelu tunge yungu yara.
So when it says, what does bliss mean in the context of the fourth seal, wisdom and bliss? Here, this is, in the fourth of the four seals then is that Nirvana is, sometimes, there's different translations, I guess you'd call it, but sometimes is peace and bliss, or peace and happiness, you could say, or peace and another way of that it's expressed is a different Tibetan word, which is virtue. It's peace and virtue, or sometimes even peace and well-being. So, but the idea is when you have attained nirvana, then you're well, nirvana means that you've completely eliminated all the afflictions, what your ignorance and your attachment, hostility, pride, all of these are completely gone. So the mind is not disturbed. Okay, if you translate that as, instead of afflictions as disturbing emotions, then your mind is no longer disturbed. You can say. So then, at that point, you have a happiness or bliss that's unchanging. You are, we call it contaminated happiness, but the happiness that's part of our samsaric existence. So if you're in samsara, then your happiness is going to change, right? It's just going to, if you are feeling happy, then it changes into suffering. You know, so it never stays as happiness. But in this context, when you have attained nirvana, then it doesn't change. Okay, so it's just you're always. I think in that case, maybe you could say blissful, but anyway, you can say you have unchanging, pure happiness. Dendadeva, and it's eternal. Dendadeva is another way of thinking.
No, Tandako, Chu said the course, so yeah, the Taba member should Tarva to a church on the Tanzinda, Chagdanda, Yamoda, Tezuma, Shiet and Dasongdo. Tanzi so my maps, Tanzil Tani Chagdana, so when Yamokan Yungara. Oh, then Taba Chimbe church on the Rajins in the Shuchun Rutani, Shenchins in the Shirtaudo. Tingaraza Kondo Danga Jeta, Ras Chibusamada, Shen Samlatonda, she did church drawing as a Musun Yamio Dugra. And it tended the condos in Gajeta, Danzisama Maverena, Dawai Hibara. Dana so the condo Churton, and you Gajation Gajation. Trado in the Trado Shorton, then assembly she did. Nig shed the church on Guara. Nazi, Yamoto Shiet and Alchik. Rajin the Churtan, Shenchins the Shirtan, and Dara, Tabachunity.
So, really, the purpose of the, if we call it Hinayana and Mahayana here, the Hinayana teachings stress this idea of eliminating grasping at the self, or it's the teaching for achieving liberation, really, this teaching. And so then you're eliminating what we call self self-grasping, or there are other translations, apprehension of a self, or conception of the self, and so forth. Then, so then, at that point, then you would eliminate the afflictions, and you would have this achievement of liberation and nirvana. Then, when we have the teachings of the Mahayana, then what you're eliminating in that is in addition to you're no longer, what do you say, grasping at the self, and instead you're cherishing others. Okay, so there's this great cherishing of others that takes the place of what any kind of self preoccupation. So you can think of those two teachings, the Hinayana and Mahayana, simply in that way.
Shidi meyo chaza, shidi meyo yate tira ba. Nga samganzi shu chenpo, nga geshe shu yin samle ni sembi ki bata namdo kanga yungu ara. Teni chung tanen, tentu tewa yungu bata yin bara.
So then, in that context of the Mahayana also, that as you're eliminating this conception of self, and then having a preoccupation with others, or just a total orientation to others, then you can then you will, in that context, you will always be happy or blissful as well. You can understand that. I just remembered one thing that Genla said was that we can understand even the idea of a peaceful or happy mind, because if we are very angry and then our anger comes down and we're much more peaceful, or if we're very proud and our pride comes down and our mind's much more peaceful, and so forth, that just reducing those afflictions, by reducing them, we can have that experience of some kind of peacefulness.
Oh yeah, that's what I Shanda.
Shanda de. Sometimes the impure is pure. Because the Dungo Damba la Kecho Shi, because Dungo Damba la Midak Kecho Shi the Midak Dungo Donga da Dame. Sometimes Donga get tabla Mizawa, Sigio the bed, Miche. They go dudes like it do, and that sometimes Norgio or what, sometimes Dungal, because
Midaba, Dunga, Donga Dame,
yeah, Dungal, Donga Dame, then it Donga, that's it, the Lokdog she, the because Rapche she nang ne did
Midabala Tabar Zimbaro, Midaba Shedu, Midabala Tabar Zibelodo Savior, Tungiala Tabar Zibelodo Savior, Mizawala Tower Zibelo,
Mizawa Zawa did Dantonga did Drawa Yor the Bay. They do. Candres Drawa Yor is. Contra Laka.
Oh, Chida, Midabas,
Damba Contra. And can Geshe explain how seeing that which is impure as pure is also referred to as being empty? I am unclear about what he meant. Yeah.
Oh, that. Tungetembe di Kasara Pumbunga Tendura, Tungetembe Tendu, Midagba Chira. Tene Tunga Wasera. Koyane Lu Longe Karina Tungeki Shichigre, Sangarazu, Dewan Bashir, Kucha Chagiora, Midagba Dunga Wasera. Don't Dame Bashe. Don't said Pumbulia, Ranja to Beta, Tension Jet on Basugore. Pumbuta. And the Ranja to Betani didn't need you, Marisura. Pumbungashe, and did to him, but they don't wear it. To him, no, one was 7 nation, Tapala nation, Joshua, the nation, Pumunga Loga Jeda, the Tendesha. Pumbule to him, beta, don't bask. Dame Basuza, Pumbu Deso, Tagging all to your Maris. Don't that day, Ranga to be Dade, Pumbuda, Pumunga the chick to your Maris, Teladame Basu. Oh, Tene, paying more Tadej in your Maris, Telatong Basu. That and that Garza, Sajan Pumbuche, Chola round with Damede, round with Dade, Pumbunga, chicks in your Mare, Kagach in your Maris, or chick that Tade Kandoma to be still up your.
Then, when we look at the 4 features of the truth of suffering, that includes impermanence, right, and then suffering, and then empty, or emptiness, if you will, and then selflessness. Impermanence, we just talked about here. Suffering is not seeing everything as sources of happiness, but seeing everything as having a nature of suffering. Then when we get to Dongwa here, the emptiness, it's talking about you're not seeing the self as something categorically different from your body and mind. Okay, that we have this feeling that the I, is it being something that's totally different from the body and mind, and so emptiness means it's empty of being totally different or categorically different. Like Geshe was giving the example of Joshua and Geshe are totally different. They're 2 very different things. That it's empty of being like that. So then when you get to selflessness, it's talking about that there is no self that's, well, you have to make a logical statement that the self does not exist because it is neither the same as, what we can say it's neither identical to the body and mind, or completely different from the body and mind, and so then it's basically investigating and seeing that none of the 5 aggregates is the self, and then the self doesn't exist separate from. So there's no. So it's also referred to as a lack of one and many.
This one, don't tell me, Pumbunga Botelia, and the Ramaveta, Pumbunga Dango, Chicken, your Mares, or Dame Basri, Ramaveta, Pumbunga da Bengo, Tadej, your Mare, or Tadek Tombares, Chicken, your Mares, to change it, shake your. This one to change it, share any damage to shake your.
So when you're talking about the Dongwa the Bay,
Dongwa to this new beton, no Tade don't water. Dame Bas did Dharma and did Dharma, Dimmer Chikiton Watera. Pumbunga the Chikita, Pumbunga would Dango Chik to Mebas, Damebas. Pumbunga would the Dadi Bengo Tade to Mebas, Tongbas. Pumbunga the choose a chola round with Dadi Mede, to the Chik to Ame. So it's explaining really those last 2, that when you're talking about the self as not being, when you talk about emptiness, you're talking about it's empty of being completely different from the 5 aggregates or the body and mind, and then when you're talking about selflessness, you're saying that it's empty of being the same as the body and mind, or that it lacks being the same as the body and mind. Yes. That was the Sami Tartan Shay Tomba says Sigdwa. The Zawa says Shagdwa. Take a dish with a Tati take of the Sanjay Chumbe Capdelia, Jagale, 힌두 출루와 아니 간사도 저기야 릭치다 찍기도 개보다 잠세다 바르메다 네 잘라 송게도 가시 릭마 붙이기도 개장게다 또 한국 송게도 배tuk자 찍으라
네
어디지도 콘주 가서 디베 멤버에 생각도 초래서라 디나시 콘주 류디 장마래 콘주 류디페 쪽바래서라 락바찬지요 말 그 팀나 포기요 말 거기 락바찬 추통나 가지디 추통기요 말서라 네 그래서 그 미리 고랑 전에 돌려 군주 수두자 가시 지주네데 가시 칸에 가시 징바데 가시 강디네 되어서라 그래서 그 달로야 가시 배짱마 시버레서 딱 류디에 가시 장마 시버레서 가시 배배 두자레 시도 어딜이야 류디라 상제년이 풍부 류디야 그 장마 찍바레서 미자외랑 시리에서 밤에 구단 되벨 때는 기억이요래 아니 그 주대 미상바래 고란 단대 샤드르바다 미상 강간 종공래 미상이 바다래 가시 류대 남갈레게 가시 뱀말레게 가시 솔레게 말이 손도 산게 강가께서 찍번에 끼그래서 자고 장매 다 생겨지 바르마다 개보다 대주 다데 장매 다래 풍부 속부대배 장마래 된대서 요래 저 속불이야 아니 선상에 다 된신다 된대요 말했어 미상 시고 들으세요 대전에 시고들이야 네 장에 다 된신지 동바스 된다 풍불이야 다 된신도 예배 동바스 되기 시험봐 어디라도 봐 풍불이 미상 어제 장마체 들리 된신 풍불 미상 어제 들리 된신 된대요 말했어 시고 식대래 뒤질랍다
So the way that impurity and purity comes into the discussion in this context is that because of the caste system in India at the time of the Buddha, then the Buddha was opposing the caste system. And the caste system was such that some people in the higher caste, the so-called higher caste, felt that they were pure. And then those in the lower caste were felt that they were impure, and so then even if somebody in the lower caste touched a cup of water for a person of the higher caste, they wouldn't drink that cup of water. So then the Buddha opposed this with this idea of emptiness of a self that's other than the five aggregates, because they felt that people from the higher caste felt that their body and mind were very pure, and the people of the lower caste felt their body and mind were very impure. So the Buddha said basically that both of them are impure. They come from impure sources. The blood and semen, or the egg and semen of your parents, and they're filled with various impurities. So both of them are impure, and there's no, you can't have a conception of yourself as being somehow pure and separate. A pure self that's separate from the body and mind, or an impure self that's separate from the body and mind. That the emptiness means there is no impure or pure self separate from the body and mind.
No, tatunda. 풍부대 미상와 임바 소부다부 차선 미상와 임바 찍바래 시작한가. 개부이나다 바르마이나다 내가 지금 수인의 리가리나. 풍부대 미상 소부대 미상와래 시라. 텔레테 셴베 장메 다스게지 요 말레스. 다지 장마이네 장메 다 장마래 소바이네 장메 다 소바래 마도. 풍부대 미상와래 강가 찍바래.
네.
개부 강가.
풍부 강가.
다 텔레테 셴베 장메 다지 요 말레. 풍부당 오직베 다요 마도 장메 다지요나. 미상에 다시 텐데 요 말에 장에 다 되세 원가주 다데 배 장마 시부지레스요라 군주 수디베 군네스 저번네스요라 어디 장메 풍부는 미상아래 풍부령어 타데 배 타데 인겐게 장메 다지 요 말에 스티 셰요라 근데 풍부령어 타데 배 다요 말 동바 셰도
So Zangwe doctor, meet Zangwe doctor, ni.
Maldice Malta. Pumbunga de Mizan Reswa. Mizan Resobul Shashan Yare. Sobo de Mizan Ranshi, Mizan Pame Kudal Shore, Tanda Koran Shari Duje Pumbude, Mizan Jungun, Mizan Ganga to Satane Sigiore, Mizan Bandanda Res, Taglapsara, Kashe Soneke, Kashe Pamela Kia Marese, Kisachine Kia Resera, so Lu Mizan de Yibachakanga. That Lu Mizan Yimba da Sangmaresha, Nazu da Sangmarako, da Zobari said, today you are my son, asking is your mares. Pumbuni Mizan, Pumbula Dash and Besang to Shenji, you are my risk.
So then it comes to mean the idea of that emptiness means that there's okay, so everybody has impure body and mind, impure 5 aggregates. They're all everybody's the same in having that, but then there's some kind of pure self that's separate from those impure aggregates. And then, so the emptiness is talking about this, an emptiness of that pure self. There's no, that pure self does not exist. There's no such thing as a pure self that exists somehow separately from the impure 5 aggregates.
Oh, that Mizawa said, Sobol Chan, Tandashevan, Shichicharwa, Zangme, Lumizawari, Zangmeta to Shayo Marisha. Yachilia, Yi Kawajibeshan, Mizawa Shedwa, Pumbu, Nagati, Koya to be church summertamjede. Samlutan and Duraki, Midabare, Teniaga, the Duaripa, Temdechi, Yomarwa, Midaba, the Dungawa, and then Koya to be church summertamjede. Pumbungaga de Yile Kawajibesures. Some Kawajia. Woman do some Kawajibesire. Some Kawajibeside Mizawa Seguares. Mizawa de Nisa. Chidi Sobokora Mizawa Res. Ele Zangmetusha Maresha. Chidi ko Mizawa Siduzako Yi Kawajibe, Koya Pumbungala Sobos, Koya to be Shokanga. And Midagba, the Dunga, the Tende, Samlutana, Yi Kawajibe, she sons of Misawas. Minutes of watching the artist of the Sigduangazo. Koako, Yili Kawajibe, she sons of Misawas. Teletonation Betame, but Tende Chadani Yungda.
So there's two meanings of the impurity of the 5 aggregates. One is just that idea of just being impure from the source, and the other one is being impure because they're involved in the being impermanent and suffering. So that they're only the subject of being what do you say? They're an object of disenchantment is the word we use. That you're, that just you turn away from them, and maybe in this context it really works to say disgust. And so then they're an object of disgust in that, or impure in that sense, as well as that kind of just being impure in terms of their source and their nature and so forth. So then when we talk about a pure self as being an emptiness of a pure self that's separate from that kind of sense of the 5 aggregates as well.
Sobo Lulisana, Misawa Kodebua. Odico, Misawa Jigdayonda, Misawa Setedua. Oh, that Chibude, Nazu Koyane, the Luda Longe to the Kabuchigua. Ye Kawajibe Shisungura. Ye Kawajibe Shimari, Ye Kawajibe Shires, the Misawa.
Yeah. So then it's easier to understand maybe that first one because, it's kind of obvious that our body and mind are sometimes, are kind of impure. So our body is impure. We can certainly understand that. But then when we're talking about when you say all of the sorry, when we say, I maybe made it unclear before, but when we say all the 5 aggregates are impure, then we're really talking about them having this nature of impermanence and suffering, and therefore being the object of some kind of disgust, or you know, I guess disgust is maybe what I think is better. And they're not really, they're not an object of, what do you say, pleasure, right, or being, you know, they're not an object of joy or pleasure, they're an object of disgust.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe if that's too strong for you, then you can say, or disenchantment or something like that. Or disillusionment, some people say. Yeah. That's Chiri me dakba drengo re sa go song yini anga be trala to Diamond Nima Rerila Jago go ye dene gandres Chiri me dakba dren tugide be trala yuta. So this is, how can I practice mindfulness on death in every moment when I am so busy with my daily life activities?
Ani busy jade lega chigora. Lega mabuyora. Lega jaya kanga de Nangba Taba Chambu Chay and the Lega Jaya kanga to Chole Kyokora. Sorry, but you know, Miloko Pangus, Kanga Jagachina, Chedogora. Gulun Samlatana. Oh, meet Miloko Koyage, Shingatapure, Lega Dichore, Mega Lega Chevore, Milikaja Lapure. Some kanga milko yeshire. Tesalabia, sorry by Inada, Swari by Inada, Nandiri by Inada, Tari by Inada, Tenziri by Inada. The Chiso Kangal Koeshira, May did the Koyarava, Tikiarava, sorry by Chala, so I come by the Shingatabe Kanga Koyara. Oh, dinner, sorry by Soariba, and it Tariba, Kesalabia. Geshe Yeshe machine me kugana shi dandu na shagra tari barwa tenzi ribare jusen samlutangure sta cha ju amarse ribala kutwa ya namju ya pelkitwa nang de ribare sem de kursigda nang ba jene ribbe ne cha ngata chizol ko yag lega shi che ta so so kulung chona de ke wa jure o ta chwa meta para nge tri lega che de chizol phe yag lega yi samba namda che lega de che a samsa che lega chi de be samba namda che chizol phe ge mele phe ge sam lega che ne ko che de do busy yina busy de chel ke ya yora o de majuna ko de ke samlu mata na ke yo maroko a pesha chira ge sam de ne yero pesha ke chimbu ke maro ko de saya de som che de So
then, did I say that in English? Just about being busy, right? I didn't. Okay. So then, actually, when you engage in any activities, it's good to think of what you're doing as being helpful to others. Okay, that you're doing something of benefit to others, and in fact, any undertaking any job or work that we do can be included into something that's busy for others, and in the Buddhist teachings, we have that we could sort of categorize activities within, something like crafts, like the people building outside here. So in that context, of course, is just sort of, what do you say, artisan or crafts maybe. And then there's something, any kind of, medical work, any medical profession, whatever capacity, And then there's teaching people about language and basically a teaching job or something. And then there's working with people in the field of how to think logically and so forth. And then there's what do you say, inner, sometimes the category of inner science, sometimes people use the word science for these, but the inner science certainly works for the last one, which would be Buddhism and so forth. So then if you think of your work as being included somehow in any one of those 5 categories, then all of those are for the purpose of really helping others. And so it's really our attitude. If you're just thinking, well, I'm doing this to make money, and then and I have to make more money, then it's not going to go very far for you. You have to take your work and change it into some kind of practice, a Dharma practice, if you will. So then, I mean, if you just think of it as making money, then, well, it'll get you some clothing and some food or something like that, but it doesn't go very far. But if you can change it to your motivation, really, it's how you think about it, your intention, your motivation, as something to be of benefit to others, then you're doing some kind of Dharma practice all the time. So if you then join that with your understanding of a mindfulness of death, then even better.
Yeah, that and that. Sanje iti sungdwa. Oh, sanje koko pangbechedo sorry bala lobse. Sanje energy sitting what I lu name of churchdo me love sungdwa. Sigla tuba pangbechedo get lap sungyara. Don't let tuba pangbechedo and it tenzi but loves. Round the shanky simkin do ye chedo. Nang do rig but lobs, change symbol sungdwa. These don't around take what symbol again. There's a kind of choose to Rayora. Oh, Caress Nico, Chizona Legacy, some milk wages for Degora. Will make get Jenny, you get Kumarwa. Me go chicken pant of your Kaja Sayas, Kaja Tuyas, Kaja Desas, Kaja Geshe Lab, Kaja Digi, Chigi, what you think of Shashira. Tintin Cabars and Sigua. Tintin, and around the death for then, the Kalakam get the middle legacy Kanga Kachira. Chigi teachers, Tintin Cabars, me Chizo Koran, the tension, but a sausage with that to Marese. And some good I said, there's a kind of surely you're going to pant over there, say, Millie Pember to or something. So, Kulung is on the children, you are there. Some of the machine, children drag your Mara, make you enjoy Yanga Yorako. Some machine. That's your metaphor now, Tanda, show metaphor, the church with Millie Pember to go there. Legacy to be a Yawachi or some Pitapuchi or something. Busy in a children, one, too late, and doing a Lagawachi, Millie Pento or some. How can we have was Legacy? One as Sayak or a Tunga or a Lutz over there. To imagine there took Marisam. She merely panton, did a churrigra. Children should be some big castle last day. Somebody on the southern Lamia sunset, somebody at Allegra. Ludang, Chawat came make it a Kulundura. Oh, that gave what Deva said, Chimba said, Chambazo as to Rangshinji Kokawaraba. Shanda Kulungi Kawadurkara, make a Jurgua. There's a Kulungi, some Lutanda Shena, busy in a Chumeo Yomara. Oh, didn't meet on this Chambacom, me Yagaji, don't know, call a Yabundo some Kawakum Suzu, Kawacham Sidwa. Do as you know, did don't the man as I knew you could do the trainer some. Nirin Shada, you don't Nirin Shada Magic, but you would a carrier or some chair. What is Chamso Chemish and Yamlish could meet and did Chambacha passage and it should. When they should mean I'll choose on a something to Lepura. So Chibu Samlutan did show you as a period to do Conducianga Geshe tradition, show you Mara.
So then anything we do can be turned into religious practice of the Dharma through our attitude, just how we think about it in terms of our motivation and our intention, and then. So, in fact, the Buddha talked about these 5 areas that I was mentioning, and said and listed each one as something that was a benefit to others. Okay, when he explained each of these 5 areas, he said this is, beneficial to people to learn how to speak and write and so forth. This is beneficial for people to maintain their health, and so then there's. When we have an attitude of love and compassion, that you don't have to. If you go about, if you happen to be doing something with that kind of motivation, then, by nature, love and compassion are what do you say, virtuous and helpful to others. But even if we can make up, what do you say, create our motivation when we're doing when we have our, when we're practicing whatever we're doing, if we can make up, what do you say, amend our motivation so that we're thinking of it as being helpful to others, then that goes as religious practice. So there's no being busy with and distracted in that sense. If you then think about if you're bringing up a mindfulness of death and then thinking along these lines, then everything you do will become meaningful in practicing the Buddha's teachings. Mi Geshe de Shiwe mi la rokje gorwa, shiwe mi shi drogi orwa, dene konto leka konto la rokje gi orwa, dene there are ways that this sometimes did semla nöbe nyanka yorebe de leka dendre jena de rangi semla nöbe nyanka duge rangi semla nugi rebe rangi kausa chujebe chujaya la pengirwa duts leka duts jena and tam semla nugi rebe
dadi taginde chikbarwa ko shidronge da suli rokba shebna ko chamba da sewe kone jene pe ko kap sangburwa churigra semla ne sede so samla dang jorwa acha masitanga samsa tinde tengi nebel sigi orda so ya miji bende chayel sigi na ka semla ne sede kande sigi na
no because semla nyumba cha so
dita so samla dang jorwa lega tinde member lega shanda chena ko nyumba cha do ge yora this so samba ku yang bis dangora chu shenge jina ngazu kanga tinde resemje kanga tinde chine shigunge chang re se soba che ke yo mare ning ji che wore ku ga byak bu ngal ku ga byak bu ra su samje pendo chene semba kala lang ji che wora ke jawa kanga le sem tro ka bu da nyam do chena sem le ne marwa ha cha ma se sem ga ti che ko sem ne gra ti sem le mene ba da so che na che tu do ka bu ngane che de tembe ne chang ju sem be nyam le ra ku no jo na
Some of us are, I don't think I said this one, some of us are around death and dying people very often in our work. Are there ways that, or is there a danger that this can harm our mind rather than enhance our practice? Well, this again depends upon one's attitude. The work itself can be very beneficial if you're doing it with a mind of love and compassion. Of course, that it will be a very helpful way to enhance your practice. So it actually, in this context, according to the teachings, you're really, we say, encouraged, like the bodhisattvas are encouraged in this context to always have a, what do you say, joyfulness or joyfulness about doing it. If you have the opposite of this and feel really put upon, and your mind is always, oh, this is difficult, well, this, I don't think I want to do it again. If that in fact will be harmful to your mind. But I mean, that's true of any what is a career or a job that we're doing. If you think in that way, if you think you're always kind of what do you say, put out about what you're doing and feeling unhappy about doing it, then that'll be harmful to your mind. But if you have a very joyful, maybe it's too strong, but just relaxed and enjoying what you're doing, then there's no danger at all. Okay, there's no danger at all in that with that kind of attitude. It depends upon your attitude.
So then,
while you're doing this kind of work, if you're happily doing it, that's good. And then when you go away from the work, if you said, "Oh wow, that was good, I did a good job," and you sort of maintain that kind of joyful or happy attitude, then I can't think of another word for gawa. It's really a good. We're usually saying joyful for that one. So maybe that's the end of the questions. I don't know if that's the end of the class or not. Does anybody have any questions about the questions? Or but anyway. Okay, so we've gotten to verse 9 there.
Nor da chala da nyanda yon da so tamasha ne ya mare sungsarwa o da nor da tam nyanda da de chido so dan digmena ne so sung ye chido ane melia ne never de chena digre vesgara rang so sung ye chido digba chebro so shenase oh tele le jagdo.
So now we're arrived at verse 9 where it says the thought or assertion that we might have in this context is if it's, we just had finished one where it said if it's reprehensible to sacrifice one's life for wealth, it must be all right to perform ill deeds to safeguard one's life.
So should take by Chavayana. And so Kawachimaya, Tunga, Tamal Shabanashi, Kawachima, Dungedi, Yangis, Tamal Devanashiris, and the Tigbasana Sigora. Oh, Tani Tamar Shache, the Tiglechi and a chase. Kawachima Dunga, and the Rantamashane, and the Tibele Argent Chavorese. Never turn a canam, the Dalan Dusha Tower says. Chiran Keba. Rajumba da Saji Nashi, Rala Shensachi, Mavache, Kawachima Dunga, and Yongsam, 14 days of Esigara.
So he's saying, no, it's not appropriate. Why do you do ill deeds, pledging yourself as security? Of course, like the wise, you must be free of attachment to yourself. Here, pledging yourself as security means that you're sort of, putting yourself down as a collateral or something, I think we call it, then for your future life's misery. And so then if you're doing like that, then you must be like the wise arahats. You must be free of attachment to yourself. So it's saying that you're placing yourself as security for suffering in the future life, and so they have a example for this.
This one, oh, delegacy was ne, but not me so much. And you ko zong ba re sigara de kan de se ne me yo jen chu sa ro me yo jen tang bu men ge chi
oh yeah
oh de ne ko chang song ge me zong ma den de sa le chen je chang mang bu tong de nyam de te ane ko li ya de ne bu ni ne chi chung re kon zo le
oh ne
oh de ne jo ne ko de kar so de oh Porujile saya tu ya kabu cere. Eka di kuni bunyi di kime di kita bunyi di song shanas. Ani tanda kabu di bu yang jia jie shou rwas la re. Ani ore se song ba chi yuwa re long ba shanda bunyi di song bar kuni. Song ne dene song ba di nima kashin ruro yu di. Ani kime di kita nge bu di konzu sal tamal te gos. Bunyi di su chi je kerangi buchunga di sobu chu ane kalaji te chi as la re. Nge pando ko tamate gos. Ko la mara nge drogo ke ne de pulia su ke ta je kalaji chi as. Nge pando tamate ko somba de san nga tamate ge ale bunyi pa taro chi se re. Tene somba de ndo re mra aja de bunyi di chi je lungba shenda je ndo ha ma ko si ndo. Tene ko de somba de ndo re show down to what is ke tamaje lungba shenda ji chin do re jaza ko korang ke tamasha gu chung re o di na shi re se kyo chen ma kira tu bu yong ale so tamasha ba na shi re so
the story is of it's translated as a swindler here. It's just sort of like somebody who's hanging out with a prostitute and drinking and so forth, and just having living it up, and then they eventually had a couple of children, but at one point then they didn't have enough food, so then they thought, well, maybe we could just sell the children. I know a merchant who would buy the children, and so then they sold the children to this merchant who lived in some other region, and then they. At one point, then the prostitute said, "Well, I'm going to go over and place myself as some kind of security for the kids, and the kids will come over and visit you. You can give them some food and so forth." And he said, "No, I'll do that. When the kids come over, I'll go over there and place myself as security." And so then he went about that, and when the children came over to be with the mother and the children ran off, and then the merchant had him as security, so he just tied him up and took him off to some other place. So it's like that. If you place yourself as security for you're putting yourself in a situation for suffering in your next life.
Do so?
Right, do so.
Oh, then you better try me double the standing and to me double the share, Sarah. Then you better try me double combat the niche. Some vacation re or give our save. You then measure our state and there is need to Samba said, "Ko keji re gyudan kem gore. Chike sare de gyudan kem go je de yo marwa. Samba de keji re ne gyudan kem ke gore esigora. Tisunda samba keji re sebe de la yiden meja da nga da samba yin sam yiden ke yo mare. Chi junga da na ge sobu cha ne keji re ne ko gigi chen do de yora. Kari na jung si bare sigora. Ne yin bu samba la ka wa na geba mende ba gebe. So
then we're changing the topic here from coarse impermanence to subtle impermanence, and so if you look in the outline on page 306, it says, since life diminishes moment by moment, do not trust it. That once we're born, it never is staying the same. It's in a constant state of flux where new causes and conditions are coming together and producing new, results and so forth. It's a constant process in flux. And then the second part of this is inappropriateness of attachment to the continuation, because liking to live long and not wanting to be old are contradictory. So, thus.
Oh, that ambo. Keji re somebody keji re sebare sura keji re ne kyu te ure sura. Oh, tela yiden meja tela nga somebody yesam mangbo kyu de ringbu de yo samsa ge yiden che ke yo mare sura. Kyu dan ke chi dan na ge chi juwa na ge sokbu cha she re keji re ne ke ko ra sura. Oh, jaza yiden meja ane yin do sando rebe sendere tani sonne digba Shebar Mary desert, Anga de Kokeji Marede in a Kundi Mambu de Andua, or Tisonako, Titandalia, Koko Mambu or Tos, Tibasak on the K.O. Maresamne, Keji in a Kundi Lichani, Urimute or some Kundi, only Tibacho, but the Rigmaresudua. Oh, Sula Somba Shecha was a Simple Keji Leshem, Miss Suinaya, so Sombache de good again, Kokeji Betamore. To take a generation, I get the Resora. Some says, I was simply occasionally, same depending on the Chile, some Korean, Gudurian, Gudure, Cochilitan, Degmarno, or some decay, Gurana Shingi, and the cage Tamurenea, somebody I take with you do your Resora. Some occasionally, may carry a thing in Mirigba, Tenatani Shebagos, Garazo, social de Neta condition, but the social nature, the social Shingi of Marisha. So talk about the genius, some you tanda you mom, but taking something to some day to us. And then Marrakech in the Akigurese. The Yena could with you something to Basan and Maris.
So then, here in this verse, it starts with it's unreasonable to sell oneself for the sake of this life by performing ill deeds in the hope of staying alive long. It's just that the idea here is that life is in a constant state of flux. So being attached to some kind of continuation of one's life is not realistic. And so the verse says that no matter whose life, it does not differ from the moments of mind. This people certainly do not perceive, thus it is rare to know the self. It's no matter whose life, it does not differ from the moments of the mind. If we think about how our mind operates, it's constantly moving from one thing to the next. It's in a constant state of change, and that's the way life is. It's not like there's anything that we can feel secure about, and there's no sense of security in our life. Then this people certainly do not perceive that we don't see our life in this sense, and then so it's rare to know the self. How it's rare to know the self, that in the sense that that then it makes no sense to then be performing non-virtuous deeds for the sake of our life if that's what's constantly happening.
This one.
Did I say non-virtuous? I hope so.
Tatunda ko ngoba condition ko ene keji Kene Dagores, Dina Shitine, somebody, Keji relation your matters. In Angarazo, Tagwa Trune, and then Gamana, Tanda, the Mamba Yasachi, Gama Yoba, Tata, the Gama Yoba, Tanda, the Mamba, Tangas and the Samloco, Tanzingo Angrese. Keji and you do your race, Sabaki, your race, or Dean Zako. Ngarazu mima wuchi te hako yo mara soso nezu de soso hako yo ma te hako ba chene soso somebody keji re ne gyu dan ken chi da na ge jwa le te ne sombachi te ko yu sam chawe me da ba de kom go re se ho bo tamje chi ne jin ji da na ge sim je sim de kari na ko keji li ya gyun ru yo ba keji gyu ya ke ko yo ba o de kom go re so go da
so in fact, our life is in a constant state of flux, which means that it's constantly changing and constantly in a state of production where you have to, everything is being, I guess we could say recreated, in constant state of production. And so then, in that context, then we don't think of ourselves in that way. We tend to think of ourselves as I'm the same person as now as I was yesterday, and I will be the same person in the future. What that means is that we're under the misconception of permanence, and or just staticness. You can think of that somehow that things last from one moment to the next, but they don't. They're in a constant state of change, and so then the way to oppose this idea of staticness that we are subject to then is to think about momentariness, how things change and have to be reproduced or produced, and go through a constant state of repetitive production, I guess we could say, something like that.
Moya, that is better. Penanga, Yamana, some Tanda, Tangari, some code on or deep at the letter, your Maris, Yora. Pena, sociology, Shuma, Champion, de Masasona. Sasona, oh, Pachinja, Miller Robert, oh, Dangedi, de Sasso, Chema Chegayona, Dicadul de Marwaco, Dicadu Savana, Sherese, my Yavanga, Tanda Yomara, Tenipu Chunjundi, Tanda Yogora, Tandanga de Yonanga, Takavacheti, Nima Yogora, Yongomara.
So the example here is looking for clothes that fell into a river a long time ago at the spot where they fell in the water. It's just like if your clothes fell in the water at a certain place in the river, and then you went to downtown to do some shopping and so forth, and you say, I left my clothes, and then you go back and you look for it right where they went into the river. There's no way that you're going to find them. So then it's just like our idea of ourselves as being somehow the same. Is that we're looking for, if we're the same self as we were previously, then we'd have to be, have those characteristics of ourselves when we were a child. But obviously now our hair is getting gray and so forth, and we're growing older, and that's not true. So then we have to think of momentary impermanence.
Oh yeah, that the Drogos and Laibujita, Yogashim Drotungish Amberwa. Well, de Panala Chebe, Panali and Drag Yoksede, Talas of Shanda, Kangi Janko, Metube, Kejima Jigbe Sumba, Kejima Jigbe Sumba said that Kejima Tonshu is a Kigorisora to take Kejima Sigura. On dating this me Tarmaji, Sekulchitona, Keji. To Churanga Sigua, or Tinde Keji Chiliane to take Kejima Sigua. What in there is a Sigura.
Then, so then this idea of the swiftness of the son of the gods It's like the swiftness of the son of the gods Ashvaka, who was unrivaled by any of the gods and others that travel in the sky. When we're talking about momentariness, we're talking about something that's very quick. Nothing ever stays. So it's just like, there's a quickly traveling God. There's no moment where anything stays, and that's momentariness, or momentariness, or subtle impermanence. Yeah, so it's like 1/50th of the snap of a finger. We're talking about very quick moments. So then if we think about that, it's another way of thinking about the momentariness is the moment it takes the smallest particle to move. Okay, if you somehow people talk about light and so forth, but we can think of smallest particle, either it's a photon or something physical, electron, but just how that, for that just to make a movement, that's the smallest moment, or you can think of it as 1/65th of a snap of a finger. So it's a little better to when they talk about light as being so fast, right? Then if we think about the smallest particle, and for that to move, it's sort of like they're searching for this, right? The ultimate smallest particle. But if we can use our imagination to think of this ultimate smallest particle, and then for that to move, if you think about like a big boulder, how slowly that moves, right? And you compare it to like this little teeny, there's the ultimate smallest particle. Then how quick it would be for that to move.
This one? Oh, that even did it. I had to get it. You didn't symbol Gavada, Gaba Mendebe, Gula Chapa, Medic Basikwa. You didn't boot and was Korakisi Kiki, you didn't boot and was some telechak the Rigma Resigua. Telecandescent. Somebody my young take, you may say, you didn't tell a shambari, somebody the Kiki Gigados. In a court, you didn't meditate about the David or Tanda de Grabase. But they called Della Kawa Rigoase, Sigdoati, some good one. You may say, Consider. Somebody my young take you may say, Serin Vechena, tell a shambari was a certain but I had was a cutie. But tell a sensation. Shanji Chapas and the Digdwasna, didn't dig Marisura. You didn't samba la Gashin say, Co using boo, somebody tell a capuchet. A canny, cuny, mecana say, Kiango Chane, Takabuchia, the Tony Nima Yonda, Gugucha, and Dromatu, the Tindelic Kabu Manasiguara, Tigawari Siguardo, hearing Butego, some Sering Bute, and the Magabache, Puchunjunesh Tatu Yomarwa, or Tigawari Siguara. Can you like you Meganase? Kema Church, Kione, and Dala Tambata Burnanse. Kione Randa Drawa Konalaya. O tende samju de charana shitu zuria yabure samgi armado mishanda samlu tanshin ge zoguti yabure samgi mares gare dala as tambata burnase kyodrave kyolia yabure samnangir mato shenti yabu mares gudo kyole chakba mirik sigara.
So the next verse 11, starting on page 71 here, is to counteract this idea of being alive consists of a series of brief moments, but since the continuity is uninterrupted, life is long. So therefore attachment to it is reasonable. That is an erroneous idea, is the response. To come up with that idea is also erroneous. You would, if we read the verse, you would like to live long, but dislike old age. Amazing. Your behavior seems like right to people like you. Okay, so we'd like to live long, but we're thinking that when we live long, we're going to have a body like we did when we were very young. It's not the case. We get old and decrepit and so forth, and it's not something that we want at all. So then living long and disliking old age are really it's very contradictory. So that's like to think in that way is like amazing. Such kind of that would fit for somebody who's like you. It means not thinking clearly or what. Not thinking right.
No, Tadi Peterwa. Petelia, Tenico, me can go Shabishi, Lingan drawing Barwa. Lingan to do no lotion you tend to go out, I care so Bungambala, Dong and Bashabishi Chashasi, like your racer. Oh, Tina Charan to Sering Bull. That degree was the Sering Butan degrees of the Condu Sering Butan, but I gave a Nimada Traka, Kuchi, Mendova de Gavares, what do you better?
So the example is here of youths that made fun of an old man sitting in a park and saying, "You look old," they jeered. But if somebody then asked them, would you like to live a long life? They said, oh yeah, no, we want to live a long time. So it's that kind of contradictoriness that living a long life and then not wanting to grow old.
So care some days do a some days that you do. Chuma do oh, they can go shabby so tower is chunjun some codo. Because so low chambernet, the chair, but I didn't chag some shingle do. I thought what's in the chair. You can go to tongue, I can go to tongue and meet and mess some good. Because somewhere your mar, tongue when they can go care or marwa. We take a church at Sering, which is your Kawakam Gra, Dangape, Sering Butage, a couple years, some lot in the some cargo, Mado. Took where I came to some rotation. What did it?
So then, there's a lot of people kind of think in that way. They just sort of get, they think, oh, I'd like to live long, but they're thinking that they will have a kind of youthful body when they're into their old age, and then when they get old, they're very unhappy with how they're what do you say? They become so much less able, and but in fact, this is a case of not really knowing how to think about your old age. It's when you get older, and if you, from a dharmic viewpoint, if you think about when you're older and you say, and you get old and you say, "Oh, I have a long life. I have plenty of opportunity to develop virtuous states of mind, and to improve myself and practice the teachings and so forth, and just have a very joyful attitude. Oh, I'm so lucky that I lived so long. That's the kind of attitude to have.
Oh, Rani Chiven Jigbale Madration to say, Te Nimi Mesambar, Shan Chivan Bashi, Yangashiba Miribastua. Rani Chiven Jigbale Tario Martin, Rani Chivalia Samutanje, Tubapan Kiva to Yell and Bezucha Machevche, and the Rangi Yende that Buddha Chishandat and the Gasure, or Chivala and Yangashiba, Mirikba Asudua, till Dr. Geshe Yeshe Shekda. Oh, Dr. Shake data.
So now we're on another topic. With the following verses, which is, if you look at the outline on page 306, it says the inappropriateness of grieving only at others' deaths, while overlooking the disadvantages of not being free from fear of death oneself. So we're not thinking about your own impermanence, but focusing your attention on grief for others' deaths. And that's inappropriate.
Tando dendelia, Kashikawa, the Shivala Soba, Mendebada Resera, Ina Tini Rangi Puda, Tendelia, Yubatele, Yangachi Yusera, Yangaji Kurata, Tungaji Kulandu Dose, Rala Yuba member Rant and the Kava Tende Inako, Tungayungu Mendosia, Puso Shivala, Yangachi, but Riso Shenase, Soso Tende Yangamachena. Shan didn't pull us over Tendelia, Kawa than she was over Tendel, Yangachi, but regret some giorno. Oh, this is Shana, Kuran Chila Yanganas, Puso Namchere, cheating, yes. Soso Chewa Jibale Madan, and Chewal and Juni, take weapon Kawa to Vielia, Majev Yang Majev, and a Puso Namchere cheating, yes. Pull us over Rangin Yanditos. And she was so well at the same day she had the Carresiguara. Rani Choja Mabone, Chidabuna, Mammy Gursa. Oh, Rani Chidagi Choja, Rani Chidagi Tigni, Petigrakuni, Pete, Deba Yushin to Sigara. And it tell us some Lutane, Chivala, the Nitan to Tarwam, Chival and Jim Magube Church, Majebar, and it pull us over Shivala, Yang Echebate. Meba Mendu the Meba with Neres, or the Meba Neres, and there might be a ranch what you stand, Chutuval and Bag with Esungua.
So the next verse is dealing with this assertion or this thought. Though one does not want to age and die, when these two happen to one that are to one, they are not as much as cause for grief as when they happen to one's son. It is therefore appropriate to grieve at the death of one's son and others. So this, again, this idea of not looking at your own impermanence and considering your own death and grieving over others is inappropriate. Why do you, the verse states, why do you grieve at death on account of your son and others? When the one that laments is a victim, how is that not reprehensible? So it would be, what do you say, ridiculous, or also maybe, reprehensible is good here too, to be lamenting, to be grieving over others when oneself also is subject to the same to the same outcome of death.
That pedere pedelia Tramsig Yokuchingish Yachiko Yongudo Akora, Golia Mabje Chitachiko, Hindu Chem and Darvish, Tulo Mendash Commission, Perishing on the Chu Kangata to the Toyatwa. Go to the Tramsig Yokuchi Gogodoa, Tramsil Shabishi Church Sigduati. They in Atako, Kora, Dia, Kosarichi, Samba Madoji, Tramsig Yokwin, some Gio Maresha. Oh, they in a Shandazo, oh, they called the Yokude some.
So there's a good example here of a Brahmin servant wearing a peacock's feather as a badge. You know, the idea is that the servant is thinking he or she is very, you know, got a great position in life as being this Brahmin servant and wearing these wonderful clothes and so forth, and thinks of everybody else as a servant by this sign, but doesn't think of herself as a servant. Yeah, so then so it's the same as somebody not thinking about their own, that they're going to die, and instead focusing on the death of their son, and it is the same as a servant not recognizing that they are a servant also, and thinking of everybody else as the Brahmin servant.
Pumandi bar pare to somewhere Nyange Cheri Bakavada, study Tambu the true Pancha Yungruba, Tatambu de Putige, and the co Tombaricina, co Papa the Desolia, Tanga Shigate, Shiginda, Sepe Kanga, Kesha Matribi, Tronzati, Nyanga Yungu Sherwa. Tambu Pumadiba pare to someone Nyange Chebakawala Nise, Muda Rani Mombar Saget, Nyange Chebakaya Mutedwa, Rani Chewala Nyange Chawar Miri Merge. Mire meje tedana ya puni dagir che madri bare budi nge bura bas gora nge busonza tingal madri beje ne jigde parudu dware tinga nyange che wari so shenas gora oh ta tambo de kanzen gashi macho arse rani purjur te se madri ni to tendrowa rigbar menjur mai no se kange se budi so se pula keba te se ya ko ngacherang puchigin da se cholje ko samshen yongba ke mare ser koran lewang te dorwa no rangi ni purjur se rangi purjur bare ser ngabu yeng da sketch se tine cholne ke yong mare se gora te se mati ni to te dwa da phan du de ko keral ke te mare koran do de le da ni mo wang dwa share se gora rigbar menjur mai no se Tendroade Mirikbake Mare Korang Shire Samdrechegwake Mare Vasigore.
So then this first verse is well, we're sort of entering into an extensive explanation by answering various objections, and it has 6 different objections. And the first one is refuting the appropriateness of grief because one's son went to the next world without asking, and so then the thought here, the exertion is, though it is proper to grieve about dying, it is nevertheless reasonable to grieve when the son one has considered one's own goes to the next world without asking. Though it should be improper, maybe in this case, it seems to me, though it is improper, but anyway.
When we read it together, you put the word not in, though it is not proper.
Oh, did I? I think that's probably better. Yeah. I don't know. But anyway, even that is not admissible. So if unrequested someone has become your son, it is not unreasonable if he asks, if he leaves without having asked. So then, because the person basically is leaving and coming under the same under the same influences of former karma and afflictions, then it's just the nature that they're going to come, that they are born and then going to die. So it's just the nature of way. That's very natural. So it's unreasonable to think of grieving because they didn't ask to leave.
Yes, what that day, my division through you. Geshe Yeshe Yomara, Pandu ko, Geshe Yeshe Yomara, Kolrawake Yomara. Oh, deep Deliapena, Michiliaco, Luburdo, Michi was no Tusha, Econi, Yamdo Terresiguara. Chemaco, the Basil duty, Luburdo Yanko, Maverendo and Roshare. Tambute, and the Cosem Deshare, that the commander, and meditated, the Tambocane also, Tingaco Mesh. Tiago Mane, the Hamagoji Yard, and Hamagon Dra Carrier, what did I say?
The example is of a man staying in a park, and a young woman arrives and agrees to be the wife of this man in the park, and she later leaves without asking him, and he starts getting he gets really unhappy, and somebody asks him, why are you so unhappy, and then he said and he explains, because she just left, and then, well, where did she come from? And he said, I have no idea. And then he replied that then since she left, just as she come, why grieve? It's just like, what? And so anyway, that's a great example. I love that.
Oh yeah, that didn't share. Niba Rani Mombe 20. Niba de Lucarsere, so among the Hamagor pushing ready, Kirania Lanch, Everest, Tanga Shigin, Dogi Dash, Lava Resiguara, Lava Chiba Resiguara, Kira Hamagua Resiguara, Canderes and Asa. Timuchina Bui, number of members, Kirange, Hamagone. Bui began at doing Dasi, Cheva de Kiranga Hamago Resere, Samlomadares, number of members says. Kiran Samlomadati Hamago Resiguara. Oh, then draw ni, Kebet number Cheverju. Kotanga doing Dasi, Goka Naguche, and then Nagitu Sarah. Oh, Tendechi do oh, Danga, doing da, development do das, and I did care about that. Oh, Dako drag, till I could do some hawk over a ticker, Hama or rest or she had to do to catch it to Labu or Resigar. Gave it number 7 years.
So the second part of this particular refutation is. But for one's confusion, implicitly he did ask to go. Okay, and so it's just that, the verse reads, only because of your confusion you did not notice your son's indications. His enthusiasm to go is shown by his growing old. It's just because you didn't understand that your son was indicating to you that he was going to go, that you didn't because you couldn't pick up on it, when it's notice, right? It's notice here. You didn't pick up on those signs. Then you didn't notice that he was indicating his enthusiasm that he had to go by showing that his hair was growing old. He started to get sick and so forth. So he just didn't pick up on that.
Oh yeah. Padu pedi shegdwa. Papa chilia puchigra yorese. And it deco legacy lumba shandaji koran pata rese. Down to the dinico ya disem desi yorese ora. Oh dinashi, ne kerang puti gave a race ora. Puti sadizanko she de koran rangshiri, tabariste yoma resiguara. The kerang gave a chest at unity, that is she is over the chibares, gave a tamadi shiwadiko. Give a Kuchiora. Or didn't she put the social Lubashandashi town, so they go some dash of Nashiris.
So then picture Dila Shago and
Oh yeah.
Then it is like the example here is a father who sent his son on an assignment, but then grieved when he was about to go and got very unhappy. So then similarly, having been eager to produce a son, it is unreasonable to grieve at death, the outcome of having been born. One has to understand that once someone is born, then they're subject to death. So then it's unreasonable to grieve at that death. Question time now. Do you want to have some? I don't know if people want to write their questions and hand them forward, or however you want to handle it. She done check up our dinner. Yeah. That's a trip she that you over. Yeah. Yeah. Would you want to shut down? The type of Nyang and David, Nyang and things on the Danda the Sikche Dinang the Nyang and J Rigi Mare then the Mambo Sungidunga the picture looks good what the Michik Shina then a Nyang and Mi Ganga Nyang and Jagi or what the Kari Jane the Nyang and J Rigi Mare Sagi what did them word my own gra? What the young cherry marriage to the code dedusa? Yabuzi de Agora. I draws on a technical young age and pendomidua. Jidden Chuluter, Jidden Lurva. The two batches are the social and Pengimara. Single and Pengimara. Then young age Moga Tambuna Sogora. They do say Yabuzi Tesha. A bully cham you say Yabuzi Tesha, then she draws on it. Tati rang she is in a lag by Yomara. Koran lag by Yomara, lag by Yomara. That drawn to her. I don't do this attack, they do say Yabuzi and take kept Saramat. Then young age got figure. Young and young Chambuchigora. Go to the dub try to 10 bed Sigua, Yaga to the Losadua. She turns on any bang with jet out of the 10 Japan, Japcha, God Dapcha. She be Chigua. What did they send to the Omar Sarah? They do say Yabuchagura. She's at the garbage, young as you call Peggy, not the Chandigra. Tongeli Peg Marwa. Susole Peg Marwa. Takawara, Molam da Capture, or Taco, they do say Yabuchev. I would say, man, I tell you, you must think a dream or some, nor shall some, Takanda, some, Konda, some, and should I say, Molam de Camneagra. That's the dance solution, young age, sorry, Shema, the young age, the Damado, Chungun and to the Shagora. Pendomidua, so soon to make on Tunga and Choyamara. Milan Pengmidua. Who did it? Jigdel also can't get them by begging away your Marachuna. So, why do the teachings say it is inappropriate to grieve when it seems that grief is part of every human life and of our cultures? There's this answer already. He said that it might be that grief is a custom, but if you think about it in terms of the teachings and what they say, it doesn't mean that just because it's a custom, it's correct. It's just from the viewpoint of the practice of the teachings, then how. Then it's not helpful to oneself to grieve, and not helpful to the person who died. They're already gone. So then, why? How could it be? How could grief be a helpful way of behaving at that time? what is being indicated here, and it comes out in the later verses, that when that person is alive, then one should be treating them as best you can, and improving your relationship with that person as best you can, so that when you separate, then, well, there's nothing really that can be done that time. And instead of there's a lot of different customs, but people are like beating their heads on the ground and pulling their hair out and so forth. But how is that helpful? It would be much more helpful just to say some kind of prayers that time and to be peaceful. But so that's what's being, meant. That's the meaning of saying that it's inappropriate or not reasonable.
교관들 시선을 깨매도 맨날 냠도 좀 시던데 요라 로스 담보도 와다. 내고 제마제마도 다 대산던데 요 말어. 네. 이거 심대 망부제 가시 semba만 기비 차도. 네. 소소 요바 종계를 차도. 네. 되는 요라 소소 댕겔 요라. 네.
Yeah, it can be. There was a custom of the person who's, of couples where if one died, then the other one would jump into a fire. So that doesn't exist anymore, that custom. But it's an example of how the grief at that time. A lot of people can, for instance, become very mentally unstable that time. So there's to bring such harm to oneself has no purpose at that time at all. So then this will become clear as we go with the following verses. Anybody else have any questions that they want about this section? Yeah, so we have some time. Let's get some more verses. She didn't check out. So it looks like we have enough time for another verse.
Oh yeah. Oh, da. Pula chechamero sumo. Pula lagbar chagba. Miri be chuse pala. Ta dire do. Tambo pula lagbar chagba miri be chuse sigdo. Lagbar change chane. Da dezo ko a ko ne yabo do da dire borsor ya. Pula lagbar chagba miri be chuse sigdo ada. Ti karesna kede paro don do tor teme je tedana ya pula chere chagbe nyange je gyur shenas takawa da nagis de so ha ko gorwa ho ta ko kandena de ayon rugi embe ta tengi to asam samare sam gorwa o de da re de ta ina ko pula lagbar du chagbe wange semre mambuche go do segi wara teme je tedana pula chere chagbe nyange je gyur shenas tende chagba rigi mares lagbar chagba rigi mares wara Karesne, Chidar Pala Putugba, Tedar Tela Kemase, Chidar Pade Pula Zawashida Yorde, Putig Tinashi, Pala Chusa Tendeo Maresigara. Chidar Pala Putugba Yidu Tuba, Chaba Teda, Tedar Tela Temayese, Putig Pala Tendeo Maresigara. Oh, and Jigden Dene, Wodun Tedar, Turi Janyega, Jigden Dezo. And the Goma de Woma, Ma, Padigma, Sosi Puda, Chamsi Sigurde, Woma de Yat, and the Chigi of Maresugora. Chidar Pala Putuba, Yutukiva Tedara, and Pala Maredin Jigde, and Pula Sogba, Tawama Keva, Homa, Dindigo, Kawa Jadagi Kebe, Pula Sogba, Cheba Sheba, Lebe, Pala Sogba, La Kejila, Dorvecheros, Mode. Oh, te carsore. 파도저 부다 저절 거진 첨부 시다르데 대 거진 첨부데 되게 말해서 제바 시에 두고 말해서 야부 제바다 하고네 거진 속 말해서 그거라 간데레스네 직대 되나 와donro 대체 토리 장에 가서 고쳐봐 오마데 텐데인데 겨와 파말 구십실라서 같은데 매네 토리 라다메 고바 녀버 까와레서 그도
So then here it's talking about the inappropriateness of being very attached to one's son. And so then the reasons for the inappropriateness of extreme attachment to one's son. This is being extremely attached, where the thought here or the objection here is that although he showed his enthusiasm to go, great attachment to one's son causes one to grieve. So attachment is not appropriate. A son does not love his father as much as his father loves him. People in the world go down. Thus, a high rebirth is hard to find. So, a father is very kind to the son and does a lot for the son, but the son doesn't reciprocate or feel the same with regards to the father, and so this is just how it is in the world, and when it says people go down, it means that they degenerate, that they'll go towards a lower rebirth, and so in this way, and not respecting their elders, and then they so it's hard to find a favorable rebirth.
Oh yeah. 다 디셀은 디셰도 디발락션 되면도 샤야 디카소레 샤야 파데다 라다 템베 쟁게 부들이 안에 가와다라 미템베 쟁게 들이야 대삼기 샤바 용마레스 시기도 데메데디 시기라 강게 제수 미템바 가야 두지 예마에서 라게 파에 제수 템바 그 삼바나시 메징게 들이야 에네 파데 이도 옹바텐데 통구마레스 부데 Pela kange se bupaye chesu mitumba la gaya yedu dukji chawa yoba maimbe chirose chesu tumba la chaso se mari yabu chenge nawa du yabu chenge tela shencha yose yabu mejenge buduzul tende kabu mehese siyara di ina madi rese kira teje chakpa chongdane dawa bashi kiwarse kirange pula kawasne chakbade chongba na shire doas pachi tian chu di lanchi chune imbache ti mane ma shire doas.
So then the next verse is helpful in this context. Moreover, attachment to an obedient or disobedient son, whichever, is inadmissible. So the verse says, when he is disobedient, no one will call him lovable. In that case, attachment is nothing but a transaction. So certainly, when their children, or the son in this case, for the father is disobedient, then no one is attached to such finds such a son lovable. But then, even when they're obedient, then why would that be a better case? Why would attachment be appropriate then? Then attachment is is only like a business transaction. When you're dealing with your son, you are giving something, and then you're expecting something in return for that. If they don't give it in return, then you have nothing to do with them, and so it's just like a business transaction.
Kera buimbe jusengi kere medwasgara. Buchi de soso yabu cheza okol kabuchigda chaba chevida. Buchi de yabu majede chimuda. Te buimbe chane jusengi kera kawada chabare medwasgara. Chongba chongne soso kebe jusendi kawade dwasgara.
So it's not just. So it's not So what is being said is that you're not really seeing them as your son. You're seeing it more like some kind of a business transaction.
Yeah, tadi pederida. Pena de pedele kebuchilia. Anis kesef ko pet koran kabu yidong washibuchi yora. Tene ko shibe imbere sede. Tene lombo to ta kebu gila Buddhi Shisha Lungba Shandashi Angera, Buddhi Shisha Lamnata, Jabu Sam Shibuji Pamgure Sam Lama Vere. Ani Karla Resne, Buddhita, Rangshas, but Chubangamba Reshasko, Tachubangamba Chigu, Pubet Usha Shas, Jesse, Shivre Kiabelia. Or they love the Condosar, or Taco, Sayakures Cheche, Lavso Cheche, Kobe, Chinche, Kawate, those Cheche Sigara. Tenekazin drops the Lombodiga. Buddhita, Tronsha's Jere, or Tapea Sierra, and a younger to the Jagal temperature in the Sierra. The Cares and Echo, Duja Jene, Shinako Ming Duja Yora, she has no Cochida Tirva, to get me door. What didn't she say?
So the example here is a king had a very beloved son who died. So the example in here, the son had, the king had a unusual, an excessive amount of attachment for this one son of his, and then. So then, one of the ministers says that thought, well, the father's going to be really unhappy, and if I tell him that the son died, so I'll just tell him that son, became disobedient and was rebellious, and so then he told this. And he told the father, and the father said, "Oh," and he got very upset, and said, "Oh," and he made some plans to execute his son, and then they told him that in that context that the son had died. So then the king was pleased. He said, "Oh, great!" And then he made all these he made it like a party, some kind of he celebrated the passing of his son. I think it sounds like very clever ministers. The lumbo de beg kebaru.
Oh, de kebaru tapsichera. De ko kebatam nyandal kawra. De nyosha cheba duja sude ko ming duja shawyora. Shisha sene ke kangal shibra. De ko ke medu sangara chongna shita chi susu kebeng tone yongdo. De ngara jo chenal shedu sendi pama padamada chi Tende yo mar simje tamje pama gyurbare tende shegyora. Kisheri kashe tende sigdo ata soso nagmida tazul tsewa chungrin rogere sigdo kashe. Samlu tangeso. Di jigchi durede. Tsewa di soso chigimba soso pen togu yoba kyangja memba she. Ko dewa de la tunge mende simje renga na shi tsewa di du nyangi yore samba di yo na. Ko gyure ke yo marwa. Yar rura tembu dura tsewa di tembu ngune tsewa de ra. Yabuchido, Chijusiade, Chitanda Marsheba, Tente Rede, Tile Wombu Nombo Tae, Titi Yagado, Simjeresa, Nanashi Titunyo Gere, Dandula Dungem, Simjeris Tichane, so the Pama the Yandil Tayana, Tileja Yagara. Oh,
so what's being showed here is then really that caring about your well, some people say, that all beings have been all beings are our close relatives, our mother, our father, and some that they say, well, this is to reduce attachment to your present mother and father, but what it's trying to produce is a kind of empathy for all beings, and equal feeling that they're just like me. I want happiness and don't want suffering, and they want happiness and don't want suffering. So you have a kind of equal feeling about and empathy towards all beings, such that then you have a real sense of caring that's not just based on what they do to, you know, in return for your, you know, care about them. It's where you're feeling, oh, they're just like me. They have a they want happiness and don't want suffering, and so so then your sense of caring becomes much greater in that way.
Tanyum shedu tindesgidwa. Sendi pama janja ke yo mar stambo. Shenda kanga ke sendi pama de chikba che yore. Shenda de chikba re trache ne chebare. Ni jene chikba re she yora. Ti shedu shenda de chikba re se so sendam duge shenja de ko chung droge re che yora. Ti pama le chidu me ba chagi samgidwa. Ti tanyum sheni ti chele ane dewan de la dunge mende ba. Yimba de semle chane sawa chebene tile lagbare dura sawa dura mevriura.
So people think that if you kind of equalize, you know, will have a state of equanimity or become impartial, you know, is maybe a good way of thinking about it. Sometimes we use the word equanimity, where then you wouldn't have as much attachment to your present father and mother, if you think of all beings as being your father and mother. But in fact, what happens is that you have a deeper feeling of caring for others when you put them, when you understand them as, well, when you add to this state of equanimity where you're, you know, not so attached and not so what do you say, hostile. You reduce your hostility and attachment and sort of have an even, what do you say, an impartial attitude. And then you add to that this feeling of that they're of equalness, where they're just the same as I am, with having the, you know, wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, and having a desire, you know, just like I want happiness and don't want suffering, they want happiness and don't want suffering. So then what you have is from this is in fact a deeper sense of caring.
Social permanent into mission that and the Tata Rimburishora, Tanya Yomara, Conjunction is Taguris Yomara. Social Pama de Social Garden Chamber that Chamber Chiba Yabanashi, Shanda Javangama de theatre, the theatre, and the spa, the Chiba Yabanashi, Conjo, the Nashi Tagore, to the Shay or Resiora. Timado. Conjo Nanju Tando Samlo Nalake, Dremet to Shensiora, or Conjo Nashi so the Pama, Pandremet to Sheshita, Sachago, Maritago, Marisio Marwa.
So you're not when we're supposed to view our all beings as being our parent, as being like our parents of this life. It's not talking about trying to sort of attribute to them the same kind of relationship that you have with your own parents. What it's trying to think, what the emphasis is, just as they are kind to us, is the emphasis of how kind our parents have been to us or are to us. Then all beings have been this kind to us. So it's seeing them in that light.
No, that's a
maybe we'll leave it at that.